What's up everyone? I'm Twisted. Last week we saw the release of a brand new motion comic which follows a new storyline for Vayne, but alongside it came an update to Vayne's lore on the Universe website. Yes, this website still exists, and no, Riot refuses to tell us when stuff gets updated here. Thankfully, the folks from the wiki noticed the changes and documented them. So, in this video we'll check out every single detail that changed in Vayne's lore. Outside of removing her color story, this update didn't change the events of her lore, but it did change how Vayne reacted to them, making her a less remorseless and sadistic character. As someone who did enjoy this side of her, I'm a bit disappointed in the changes, but I'll leave my thoughts for the end of the video. Let's start with her short description. This used to say that Vayne was a remorseless monster hunter, now it instead says that she's uncompromising. Her heart full of vengeance is replaced by saying that she's hellbent on ending evildoers. Before she was only truly happy when slaying practitioners or creations of the dark arts, but now she's just an efficient killer. From these changes alone you can already start to see what I mean. There's a shift in the language used to describe how she feels about what she does. Killing her targets is no longer something that gives her pleasure. At the time of me working on this video, this short description is yet to be reflected on the League website and client, but I'm sure that will happen eventually. Moving on to her biography, this used to start with the same paragraph as her short description, which is no longer present. The part about her upbringing remains unchanged, as well as the murder of her parents. The part where she meets Evelynn was tweaked, now it's a bit more detailed, describing that the demon looked down at Vayne and that her eyes glowed yellow. The lustful smile she gives Vayne, who is 16 years old here, was changed to a hungry smile. Personally, I never interpret it that way, but I can see how some people would. Don't worry, them removing the lustful part doesn't mean they're swapping Evelynn for another demon. The demon's description still matches Evelynn, and Vayne's new skin also has an interaction with her, so she's definitely still the one that killed Vayne's parents. The impact this had on young Vayne is still mentioned, people still didn't believe her parents were killed by a demon, the mention of her heart being full of hatred is still present, and her parents' death is still the reason she decided to become a monster hunter. She seeks a teacher in the Freljord, there she meets Frey who refuses to train her, and Vayne challenges her to a duel. All of this remains unchanged. In her old bio, Vayne was not expecting to win against Frey, as her only training so far had been a single afternoon of studying fencing. This part was changed to a few lazy summers of casual archery in the backyard of a family friend. This is a direct reference to the flashback present in the new motion comic, What We Fear, where we see her being trained by Niles. I think this is a decent change and explains why she was already training so young. She's part of a rich family after all, so having these kinds of hobbies, be it archery or fencing, doesn't feel out of character. And this becomes a nice transition to her having a weapon of choice when she's older. Vayne convinces Frey to train her, and they return to Demacia. They spend years training together, with Frey teaching Vayne the fundamentals of dark magic, beasts and vile spells. This leads up to her first kill, a bloodthirsty creature. And here we finally get another change. Her old bio had this part saying that this first kill awakened something in Vayne, pleasure. She enjoyed killing the creature. This part was completely taken out, removing any sadistic tendencies about her character. The bio then continues unchanged, with the two of them hunting together throughout Valorant. At some point, they saw the potential Evelynn cult. Vayne worried about the safety of her mother figure, but it was her who ended up badly injured because of one of the cult's priests. To help Vayne, Frey transformed into a Freljordian wolf, killing the priest. All of this is exactly like it was in her old bio. In both versions, Frey transforms back, but the new one makes sure to mention Frey's eyes. They're intentionally described as glowing the same color as Evelynn's, though this isn't here to draw an actual connection between the two. It's more so that from Vayne's perspective, they both had the eyes of monsters. In the old version, Frey says she's a shaman. That part is not in the new bio, though since she still transforms, that hasn't really changed, even if she herself doesn't mention it. In both versions, Vayne doesn't let Frey explain herself, killing her mid-sentence. The old version used to say, whatever affection she had felt for Frey evaporated upon discovering her true nature. A tear formed in Frey's eyes as she collapsed, but Vayne didn't notice. Whatever warmth the two had shared died with Frey. After this, Vayne simply returns to the hunt, her thoughts only on the demon, the kill that would be hers to save her, and all the kills to come. The last line in her old bio being, for the first time since her parents' death, Vayne smiled. The new version reworks this part completely. After killing Frey, Vayne's hand trembled. She fought the bile rising in her throat, and then she returned to the hunt. Her new bio ends with, Frey had lied, and Vayne had been a fool to trust her. She wouldn't make the same mistake again. She refused to look back. As you can see, the new version is way less sadistic. Vayne isn't as apathetic towards Frey's death. She still kills her, but we get a bit more emotion from her before she returns to the hunt. Next we have her short story titled monsters. This story starts with Vayne killing a man who had been transformed into a beast, and then Vayne brings the body back to his wife. She had deduced that the wife was actually a Therian and the one responsible for the man's transformation. But instead of killing the wife as soon as she saw her, Vayne played along before revealing that she already knew everything. When asked why, she replied, "Because I wanted to be sure I was right. Because I wanted you to feel the panic that he felt. But mainly, because it's fun." As you can see, this short story really emphasized Vayne's sadistic personality. The story was removed from Vayne's page on Universe, and the stories page no longer works. If you want to read it, you can still do it on the wiki. So what was the goal of these changes? Well, the changes specifically target the parts of her lore where Vayne is taking pleasure in killing. For example, the line where she enjoys her first kill being removed, or the smile after killing her mother figure. These changes make her a less sadistic character. She's still ruthless, but now there's more emotion behind her actions. For example, the way she reacts to killing Frey. Her shaking and feeling nausea gives the idea that, while she still believes she did the right thing, this wasn't a decision she made lightly. While before this wasn't the case, in fact she even took pleasure in it. Now there's a bit more emotional complexity, she's forcing herself to view the world as black and white, when before she didn't have to force it. I think the goal was most likely to make Vayne a more relatable character for us, the readers. It's obviously easier to relate to someone who, well, isn't as crazy. And now that we know what changed and why it did, I would like to give my 2 cents. First, let me just say that the sadistic version of Vayne only came to be in 2017, when Galio received the VGU and the whole region of Demacia got a much needed update. Before these changes, Vayne was simply someone who started hunting users of dark magic after her parents were murdered by a witch. There wasn't much to her character, just like there wasn't much to any champion in League's early days. Her transition to a more sadistic character wasn't liked by some, which is understandable since this Vayne wasn't written to be a likable character. But like I said, this change happened in 2017, which was almost a decade ago, so this is the version of her character most people are familiar with. The only lore she got after this update was in 2021 with the Sentinels of Light event. Here she seems mostly in character, except we don't really see her taking that much pleasure in killing. After joining the group, Vayne doesn't really do much in the story, but at the end, she does remain a Sentinel, which was later reflected in her LOR cards. Here, her voice lines also don't show her as being sadistic. So despite her biography and color story existing for almost a decade, this side of Vayne was never expanded or explored further anywhere else, and now her lore was changed so that it no longer exists, which retroactively makes her other lore a bit more consistent, assuming any of it is even canon. Some stories that focus on monster hunters focus on the ethical dilemmas the heroes or anti-heroes face in their pursuit for what they believe is right. These are usually about how far they go before the line between them and what they hunt starts to blur, and that's usually what makes these stories interesting. However, Vayne's old lore strays from this, as to put it bluntly, Vayne was batshit insane. The line isn't as blurry when the character is willing to kill anyone, even their own mother figure, just because they use magic. And even worse when they find enjoyment in this and in killing monsters in general. For better or for worse, this was what made Vayne's character unique. She was definitely not a good person, in fact she was a psycho. I know not everyone enjoyed that, and I understand that these changes make Vayne an easier character to write stories for, and for readers to relate to. But the fact that everyone knew this sadistic side of her shows how much it was an essential part of her character, and being unlikable doesn't mean she was poorly written. That being said, she wasn't that well written, in my opinion. Vayne was a very one-dimensional character. She enjoyed her first kill, and that's all her character was from then onward, a monster hunter who took pleasure in killing her targets. However, this was only the case because Riot never explored this side of her character further. The lore she got after 2017 could have done so, but it didn't. The update she got this year could have, for example, spent more time showing us how this side of her came to be as a way for her to deal with the trauma of losing her parents to a demon. How this whole persona she built is a defense mechanism against her trauma. Her new lore could have shown how her parents' death still impacts her life to this day, and then we could have seen her becoming better at dealing with it, or becoming even worse. Yes, all of this can happen with a new Vayne. What I mean is that we didn't need to change her for these ideas to be explored. I think this sadistic version was at least quite unique in League's roster. A woman who turned out not so different from the demon that killed her parents, both relishing the suffering of their targets, both taking pleasure in the pain they cause, one that believes she is helping humanity while not being so human on the inside, and another who preys on humanity, luring them by looking like them on the outside. Some parallels that could have been interesting to explore. Again, most people knew Vayne for the sadistic side, for better or for worse, and with it existing for a decade, there were obviously people who liked it and were fans of it. There was an audience for this Vayne, one that could have grown if Riot had explored her further. I believe she could have become more interesting while keeping this core aspect of her character, so I really don't think there was a need to take it away. Even more so when part of the reason seems to be to make her more general appealing, more relatable. Riot has made a lot of changes to the lore in recent years, intentional or not, that make it more digestible, more appealing for general audiences. With such a huge and deep universe in their hands, I don't think they should be so tame and safe when it comes to discussing more serious topics. Not every story needs to be so digestible, not every character needs to be relatable, not every part of this universe has to appeal to the largest number of people possible. On top of this, Riot is still telling safe contained stories and tiptoeing around certain characters or events, even 3 years after Arcane was announced to be canon, and they promised to slowly fix inconsistencies and update the lore. There are many champions who never got new lore after the major update of 2014, and there's plenty who are in desperate need of new lore, or at least an update to their bios, since Arcane became canon. So far, only 2 of these champions have received a lore update. To me, this just makes changes to stories of champions which didn't really need to be changed feel even more questionable, regardless of the quality of the changes. To conclude, I want to say that if you enjoyed this new direction for Vayne's character, that's perfectly fine, but being upset that something you like is changing is also valid. This new Vayne story is still developing and it might end up being pretty good, but that's always a gamble. Replacing something with something else might bring a bigger audience to the new thing, but that might come at the cost of the fans it already had. And in the worst case scenario, you end up with something that's just as niche or even less popular than before. Personally, I'm disappointed to see the sadistic Vayne go away. I think she was quite unique amongst League's roster. I'm open to enjoying this new Vayne, but sad about seeing the old one go. Of course, there's still the possibility of this Vayne becoming like her old self. Her story is still unfolding, but I know Riot. I doubt they made all of these changes just for her to stay the same. I'm glad they at least kept the death of her mother figure. I think that's a solid part of her lore that still defines her as a character, even if now there's a different flavor to it. I like that she still sees the world in black and white, even if now it's more obvious that it's a facade. There's still stuff to like about this Vayne, so like I said, I'm open to also enjoying her new version. And I'm very interested in seeing where her story goes this season. But what do you think? What are your thoughts on Vayne's lore being changed? Do you like the changes? Do you not like them? Or do you simply not care? Let me know down below. I'll probably have another video on Vayne soon, discussing where her story might go and the mystery surrounding her parents. So make sure you subscribe to my channel so you don't miss out. Subscribing is free and you can always change your mind later. I'm Twisted and I'll see you guys in the next video.